All right, so for those of you joining late, this is basically a really crash course to Corona. I know some of you couldn't see the Ustream, so this is really impromptu, but really just for people who don't really have a lot of experience with Corona, or they do, or they want to learn a little bit more about Lua. I'm a Flash developer, so I have kind of a unique perspective. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but I wanted to show some of the work that I've been doing and some of the things that I've learned in the past 6 months of playing with it. And hopefully, if you got any questions, you're welcome to ask. And this is very impromptu, so I'm going to record this and put some links on later, so I don't have a lot of my resources with me. 4:30 a.m., you can't talk? Get coffee, man. That's what I do. All right. So, let's see, here's what I got. Everyone is asleep. I know. I think Spano was saying he was in New Zealand. He was up at 5. I'm like, you're up at 5? That's insanity. So what we're going to talk about is basically this is an intro to Corona. My name is Jesse Ward, and if you don't know, I'm a Flex and Flash consultant. So I started doing a lot of Flash and Flex animation and Flex, and no one really told me that the career path for a programmer is to be a consultant. So what that means is you get really good at coding, and all you do at the top tier of your career is either A, become a manager, B, become a consultant where you fix other people's code, or C, you do what Carlos did and start a startup. So those are the really 3 options. So until I start a startup, I'm basically being a consultant. That's how I pay my money and stuff. I do Corona just about every night now, sometimes Flash. And like a lot of people, I grew up wanting to be a game developer, but I didn't know C or pointers. So Flash was really my gateway to that. So what we're going to talk about today is Corona, Lua, a lot of object-oriented stuff that I have, some of the game loops and tooling, and let's see, make sure, skip this version, make sure that ScreenFlow is recording, so for those of us who want to go, okay, it is, good, and tooling, basically the tools that I use, some of the things I learned about what works with Corona, what doesn't, and how I make stuff, and things I want to focus on that I think are pretty relevant of why Corona is so special is really the physics, the ads, and virtual currency. One of the things that are really relevant in what we do today. C sucks. Every C coder I know is smarter than me, so maybe they know something I don't. I don't know. All right, so let's start with Corona and really talk about what it really is and what it does and why it's relevant. So Corona, if you're not familiar, is basically a cross-platform development suite, SDK, and runtime environment. So what it does is it allows you to develop in Lua, a very lightweight scripting language, and you can develop for Android and iOS. They have a lot of other platforms they talk about, but right now, unless you're European, no one cares about Nokia. So it's unfortunate too, because you talk to any Japanese or Italians or anybody who's in that market, and there's really a lot of money in it. But for now in America, they're focusing on iOS and Android, and which is funny because most people make more money for iOS. So what's great about Corona is that you can write in a really lightweight scripting language really quick and deploy pretty quick. They actually do the builds on a server, so you don't have to install a lot either. Yeah, I tried Objective-C, man. I really did. Just didn't do it for me. So if you go to Anscamobile.com, you can learn more. They have basically the only page that I really go to every single day, like all day, is this resource APIs. And this is basically everything that they can do. There are some hidden things that they can do, like they can do 3D audio now with the same audio API, but they don't really publish how to do it, except for their blog. So there's a lot of interesting things that are not shown here, but this is really the start of the APIs. And what I wanted to talk about today for some of the APIs and focus on are the physics, the virtual currency and stuff. But let's talk about what these things are and what are these items and stuff. They're called Lua. So there's really 2 places you can learn Lua, specific for Corona. There's a lot of places on the web, but the first 2 important ones are learningcorona.com. It's basically made by Peach, I think Pellin, or I forget her last name, Bibi, I think. But she put together every single link for what people do for Corona and Lua and how you get it set up. And if you go here, you can see all these links to every single thing regarding libraries, regarding how you do Lua, and things like that. Let me add Rob. and then invite him. So one of the things that I was kind of overwhelming by me was I come from a very object-oriented language, and I have no experience with Lua. So when I went looking around, there was this website called like Lua.org, I think, Lua.org, and it's okay, but I had expectations about how I wanted to learn because I come from Actionscript, and if you're familiar, Actionscript 1, the old days of Flash, had a very Lua similar language. Like it was very, very similar. That it had the prototype, the very flexible, variables. Everything's a variant. It's very lightweight. You get no strong typing, things like that. So if you're not familiar with that, then let me get to this other blog entry and I'll show you some of the basics about Lua, and I'll show you some code over here. Bob Wall. Yeah, Bob Wall is actually a Flash guy too, and I overwhelmed him with Lua stuff yesterday. So, all right. So let me find my Lua post. I want to explain some of the strange things I found about Lua. And there's another guy named John Lindquist who's a very famous Flash developer who does the Paper Vision 3D engine. He has a completely different opinion on how to code Lua than I do, so I'll post some links to him so you can get a completely different perspective. And again, he's smarter, so maybe he'll have some things that I don't know about. So where is... All right. I got Bob, I got Wall, I got Pepper, I got Mark. Did I get Mark? I think Mark's in here. Is Mark in here? Mark? Yes, Mark's here. All right, good. So Lua is coded in just about anything you want, any text editor. I'm using TextMate. This guy named Darren, he made this really awesome bundle that allows you to code in TextMate, hit a button or hit save, and it launches in the Corona emulator. And what the Corona emulator is on Mac and PC, it's basically this program that runs on your computer, and it emulates the game. So you don't actually have to install it on the phone, which is really nice. So what I'll do is I'll go to Corona, and you can see Corona SDK here. And basically this is a simulator and a debugger, right? So this is what you run to see stuff. And let me go back to Skype real quick in case you guys want me to slow down. Yeah, so PS Pad. The best IDE on the planet is called Intellij. And I got the free version, but the enterprise version is good too. The problem with Intellij right now is that Lua, in terms of hardcore development, is pretty, what's the word I'm looking for, is pretty new. So people who do enterprise development traditionally use Eclipse, Intellij, or some Emacs VI command line tool, right? And Intellij has, just like Eclipse, a lot of wonderful plugins, but the Lua ones are new. And as you know, with anything new in software, it's not polished, doesn't work sometimes. You know what I mean? So there's this guy developing a Lua plugin, which works pretty good. It gives you syntax highlighting. Sometimes it gives you code hints. So it's pretty cool. But I'll show you this project that I'm working on in it and show you some of its features briefly. If you link it to the Lua runtime, you can get traces and things like that. You can actually see your prints and everything else, debug your code. I'm not using it for that, so I'm just using it for coding. So Intellij is neat in that you get code hinting and code complete. So for example, if I go to my main Lua, you'll see I get code coloring. So I get red when things are used. It's green for strings. And it's pink for booleans, and you can customize this obviously, but here's what's neat. You actually can, on some of these particular things, find out where it's instantiated. Just click and it'll automatically scroll to where it is. You can click like a hyperlink and go inside of the actual Lua file. And that's really nice. Where in TextMate, if you look, doesn't really do that. Lua, either Intellij is where I do most of my hardcore coding, and then I'll actually run and test in Intellij or in TextMate, because you hit Apple R, or on PC I think it's Control R, it'll launch the Corona simulator that's pointing to your code, and it'll launch my terminal here on PC, on Mac, and this is where I see all the output. So my game worked, my game didn't work, all the error message, everything else, right? I'm running 50 programs, so give my computer a minute. So you can see it's running my game here in this iPhone emulator. And if you want, you can change what device you're viewing, such as the iPhone, such as the iPhone 4, such as the Droid, or the Nexus 1, whatever else. And so it handles scaling as well, so you can kind of see it. I'm having some masking problems, but you can see where it launches here, gives you warnings and stuff. So this is generally how you spend your day. You code in TextMate or code in Intellij, you hit File Save, and it'll relaunch your game in the emulator, and when you're done, you go up here to File Build, and that's how you make your actual APK for Android, or the IPA for iOS. iOS, and it compiles on the server, so it's a little slow sometimes. But that's really all there is to developing for actual Corona. It's pretty simple. I'm using one thing to note about an Android, and this is where cross-platform becomes a pain in the ass, is that Android does not support folders. So you'll notice here on the left that I have every single file on the root. Now this is the exception because I'm still developing this. So iOS supports folders, Android does not. So what I've been using is the underscores to emulate packages or folders, so I can at least say game GUI and everything's organized. So it's complete utter pain. Let's see. Komodo instead of TextMate. Okay, I'll check that out. What else? JetBrains is given away. I didn't attend Max. I suck. I should have gotten a free version. All right, so what I want to talk about from a Lua perspective is what are the really commands, like what does Lua do? So if you're familiar with Actionscript, great. If you're familiar with Python or PHP or anything like that, great. But basically what it is it's a really lightweight scripting language that's very similar to JavaScript, Python, or Ruby, in that they're both scripting, they're interpreted, meaning they're not really compiled. You can do some crazy stuff at runtime and things like that. So by the way, if you have a question, you're welcome to ask in the chat for those who just joined. Sergey, I think I saw your script for that. I'm going to have to go look again. I think you were the one who did the dynamic lookup. I can't remember. It's been a while. But if you post a link to that, it'd be awesome, because not having folders sucks. Big time. All right, so if you want to know anything of what's going on in your code, you're just starting as programming, or you have programming experience but you're not sure what the hell is going on, print. You want to learn print. So print, if you're not aware, is just as simple as doing this. And I'll say, actually I'll do a new one right here so you can see the code. Let's call it test Lua. So print has basically two forms. You can say print hello world. You can say print hello world with parentheses, or you can say print hello space comma world, right? So it's whichever way you really want. I use the parentheses just because I'm used to it, and it's really been hard for me to get used to using commas instead of pluses. Actionscript supports it, but and so do other languages, but I'm used to using pluses. So if you want to concatenate, use that. So if you want to concatenate the two words together. So that's basically print. Print is your best friend. You learn print, you'll be safe. Awesome. Thank you very much, Sergey. You rock. That's print. Comments in code are basically done with dashes. So that's how you see a comment. You comment lines of code, things like that. If you want to do multi-line, you use this little dash thing, and what that allows you to do is block comments. And the reason this block is important is when you're testing things in Corona, which I tend to do a lot. You'll scroll to the very bottom here. It allows you to take pieces of code, comment them out, and save them for later. So if you want to uncomment and test it, you can just uncomment it. So that's basically the block comments. The globals are kind of strange in Lua. Basically, everything's a global. So if you don't use local, it's a global. And there's this magic thing called G, which is near and dear to my heart, G, which you can put all kinds of stuff on. So if you want to access stuff from anywhere, you just go G stuff, and you can access G stuff anywhere, which is really great. The difference between Lua and Python and other languages is that G can be configured, so you could have multiple Gs, which is a total mind twist, but it's cool. So if you want to have multiple globals that exist in multiple environments, you can actually modify that. So pretty cool. So that's global. You can also do local variables as well. I think in PHP it was something like function stuff, and then you had to do global, right? And so suddenly your variable was global. Where in Lua, it's the opposite. You actually have to say function cow and then local cow. So this cow is different from this cow, right? Say method. There we go. So this cow is different from this, right? So that's the whole concept between global and local. The reason you see this everywhere in Lua documentation, in Lua samples, is because local is really, really, really fast. It's a wonderful way in Lua to quickly reference variables versus having to look up, right? It has to look up to the method, has to look up to the variable, everything else. So that's why you see cow or local in front of everything, including functions, right? It's just how they do things. Dog. Hey, you're funny, Bob. So that's why I use foo a lot for globals, because you can access it anywhere, but local is what they use a lot. All right, let's see. So if you want to, the difference when something is not initialized or has no value, it's called nil. So in Actionscript it's called null, and here it's called nil. Nil is basically I haven't instantiated anything yet. So if you want to look at an example project, we'll create one on our desktop here. Hit File, Save, and I'll say hisnac o thiznong and say main.lua. Main.lua is your entry point. All you need is a main.lua in your actual project. You don't need anything else. That's how you start it. And Darren's code thing is smart enough to know how to launch from that particular directory. So if I hit Apple R in this main, TextMate will actually send a message and launch the Corona SDK from this. If you're on PC, I believe it's similar. So nothing's here, right? So we're going to say print hello world. This is our first Lua program. I hit save, and you can see it printed here in the output. I believe there is a way to get that to work in Intellij, but I'm too stupid to figure it out. So when I do, I'll blog it. So one thing I want to say is if you go print, let's say print cow. Now cow doesn't exist yet, right? So you'll see it says nil, right? It's null. So if I say cow equals cheese, and then say print cow, you'll say it's cheese, right? So if you want to get that memory back, or you want to get that variable back for later usage, you just set it to nil. Very similar to JavaScript and everything else. There is no delete keyword. There is no, garbage collection keyword like that. You can run garbage collection like in Lua. Unfortunately, you can't really do that in Flash. But in Lua, you can say nil and then run the garbage collection command and get your variables back, which is nice. So that is what nil is. Nil is used for everywhere, and it's good to memorize that. That is basically the basics of doing print, of doing initializing variables, globals, how you detect if something is nil, or if you null to get your memory back. So let's get into the basics of the language, which is, if you're familiar with any other language, if-then statements, functions, and for loops, which are for loops I'm still wrapping my head around. So let's talk about data types first. The data types, they have pretty standard stuff. They have let's see, they have numbers. So num equals 1. They have strings. They have booleans. They have. All right, so let's talk about tables. Tables are, and I'll repeat this a little bit. Tables are like the main way that it's no worries. If you've ever done most languages, they have some kind of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? They have some form of core data type. Python, Ruby, and everything else have the concept of an object. So if you're familiar with an object or an object of slots, that's what a Lua table is. So a Lua table is basically this. Table equals blah. So that's a table. Tables are very similar to arrays inside of Lua. Oh, wrong number. The strange thing about tables in Lua is that they really are, unlike objects, they have no inheritance, they have no references, and they basically are very dynamic. So there we go, plus a ride. So what's strange about the tables to me is I'm used to tables having built-in methods, built-in functions, but they really don't. So you actually can add just about anything to them. You can add other variables such as like its name, is my table. It's table value equals 4. I mean, whatever you want, you can really add. And you can also add it in different ways. You can go table, if you're used to the JavaScript notation, it's very similar. Like you can say table name equals cheese, comma, value equals 9. So tables are really flexible in that you can do everything else. And this is the bread and butter of Corona. So if you, or in Lua in general. So if you learn tables, you'll know everything. Like you'll totally understand it and everything else. The challenge I found with tables coming from other languages is scope. So if you're okay with scope in JavaScript, you'll do just fine in Lua. If you're from Java, Erlang, C with block scope, you'll be completely confused. And that's just the way it is. So that's basically tables in a nutshell. And if you look at the Corona API, if you want to go to, I'll post the URL so you guys who can't see the video can see it too. Go to this URL, and you'll notice that just about everything works the same way for the whole tables. Like analytics is a table, ads is a table, event is a table, easing is a table. They're all actual tables with values. You'll notice that some of these have parentheses though, and those are actual functions, and I'll talk about that in a second. So let's go to, and I'll paste this in the chat for you guys who can't see as well. Let's go to Intellij. I like Intellij better for functions. So I'm going to create a new script here in Intellij, and I'm going to call it test Lua. Okay, fine. We'll call it Mugu Gaipan. Yeah, I bet you didn't think of that. There we go. All right, so I'm going to create a table test. And what we're going to do is we're going to give it some functionality. So if you want to write a function is basically just a block of code that runs. If you're familiar with functions in JavaScript or Actionscript, they're the exact same thing. In C, they're called methods. In PHP, they're called functions. They're a little like JavaScript, Python, and Ruby. They're very flexible, and their scope is basically defined where they are. So if we say function do something, and we say print do something, then you can invoke it via going do something, right? So I'm going to paste and run this inside of TextMate so you can see it run, because I don't have Intellij wired up. So we'll say taste do something, run it, and you'll be able to see in the terminal here where it says do something, right? It actually ran it. And what happens with functions is they can explode. So you can type in something really bad like cow equals moo plus cheese, which makes no sense, and it'll explode, right? So you'll get this runtime error, and this is what you'll spend the majority of your day in inside of coding Lua. And let me paste this into Skype for you guys who can't actually see the screen. There you go. And what's rough about this is that you don't know if it worked or not. So what's very common in Lua is that they'll return true from functions if it worked. And there's this nifty little function called Assert that basically says, did it work or not? So do something. Let me paste it. If it didn't work, then, dude, do something failed. And when you run that, you'll be able to see in your terminal if it worked or not. Assert, this little function right here is basically similar to calling error. Error is it'll throw an exception such as something broke, and it'll stop execution of your script. So if you're familiar with try, catch, and throw in Java, if you're familiar with that in PHP or ActionScript, it's very similar to that. So you can run error. All right, so we're going to say assert do something, and it doesn't work. And then if it doesn't work, you get a stack trace out. So you'll see a runtime error. It didn't work out, right? The reason you want to do that is if you don't do assert and you just say do something, you'll get a runtime error, and you won't necessarily know where it came from if it breaks, right? That's what's really frustrating, and sometimes it'll just not give you an output at all. So it's pretty frustrating. So let's do. So you'll see these runtime errors that I get, like I have to look at main Lua, attempt to perform arithmetic, versus, do something didn't work, right? So the way functions work with tables are really interesting. So we'll go to, let's make a table, test, and we'll say test has the ability to do something. And you can do it in two ways. I'm going to do it the easy way, which is test something, and say print something. And then I'm going to go test.something and call it as a function. And you'll see it says something, right? Now here's the difference. If you're used to other languages where you have scope, how do you refer to the test inside of the function? What is test? In JavaScript, it's called this. Inside of Lua, it's called self. So we're going to print out self. And we're going to give test a name so we know what we're talking about here. Name. My name is test. Test.self.name. So you'll see inside of self.name, you'll see that it doesn't know what it is, and I'll tell you why. If you use a function with a dot, it doesn't pass its scope. It has no idea where this function is scoped. But if you use a semicolon, it does. So this is one thing that I had a lot of problems coming from Python and everything else. I'm going to paste this in Skype right now. When I came from Python and Skype and Ruby, I didn't really understand, the scope and what it is. So if you type your functions like this, where you associate your functions on your tables, then using the colon allows you to do that. If you don't want to do that, you can use something called a closure, which looks a little bit like this. Instead of self, we're going to say test. Test is out here. It's going to be referenced directly in the function. Okay. So when you look at the runtime, self, my name is test, right? The problem with doing it this way is you're referencing a global variable. Test is also slower, and it's not as flexible if you want to reuse the code. So you should probably use self. That way, if it explodes, you fix the bug early. So that's basically how you do functions. That's how you do method calls, if you're familiar with methods on classes. And if you want to make a bunch of tests, then you can associate their functions like this and wrap it in a function. So that's the basics of doing functions inside of Lua. So if you look at the Lua API, every single thing works in one of two ways. Most of them do the globals. Let me get my SDK and I'll show you. So like for example, ads has ads.hide, or analytics has analytics.event. You'll notice they don't use colons anywhere. Colons are usually used for your own things, such as movie clips, where it says object.play or object.setDrag, whereas transitions and others expect you to pass things in. So just be aware, dot, and colon is the two most important things you want to learn. So that's basically the really big gotcha that got me for about a month, was the this versus this. All right, so that's the basics of variables and functions and everything else like that in Lua. So let's talk about types. So if you want to trace out type, you want to know what the heck you're looking at, just type in the word type, and it'll tell you if it's a string, number, or function. Since you don't get any typing in Lua, it helps to know what the heck, is it a string or a number? You know what I mean? It's nice to have type. So let's talk about if statements. If statements are very easy, I think, compared to other languages. So if you want to say name equals Jesse, if name equals to Omar, then print he is the man. Else print not Omar, no good, end. So if you print it out, you'll see it says my name is Jesse, it's not Omar, right? You can do ifs a bunch of different ways. You can actually do it on the same line. If name equals Jesse, then print yo, end. That'll work as well, right? A lot of people like this. When I come from other languages, I think it's completely unreadable, but it is what it is. People can do whatever they want. You can also do an else if. So you can say if name equals Omar, then print sup. Else if name equals Jesse, then print yo, come in, and then you do end, right? So that's how you do an else if. There is no way to do a switch statement inside of what do you call it, Lua, which is unfortunate. So I'll paste out the stuff in Skype so you can see it right now. So it's unfortunate you can't actually do switch statements, but if you do the whole one line with else if, it reduces it. So, all right, so that's if then statements. Let's see what else. Those are the for loops are really strange. Let me see, blah 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 tables, blah blah. All right, so let's talk one more thing about tables. I found was interesting. You can dynamically create things at runtimes on tables. If you're from other languages, this might seem a little strange, but if you're in JavaScript, it's completely normal. So let's say I have a bunch of different steps, and I want to run a bunch of steps. And why would you want to do that? Well, when I ran my game on the phone, it crashed. I don't know why it was crashing. So I created 18 steps to identify why it was crashing. And so I basically went like this, and I'll post some of this in Skype so you can see. Now, I don't want to manually type that code out and print it out in the debugger. So what I did was I dynamically referenced the function name via global, like this. And you can build a function or build a variable or build a number and put it on tables. It's a very, very powerful way of doing dynamic things with very little code versus writing step 19, 19 times, right? It's a lot nicer to do those kind of things. So here is how I called step 19. And I'll print that in Skype as well. And you can do a lot of other interesting things too. So for example, if I want to say a table, let's say holder, and I want to say holder equals name plus whatever the name is, holder.weight equals 9. We'll say name equals name holder.weight. And then we'll print out the holder name. You can see its name is 9, right? So it works to actually dynamically concatenate those variables, right? Name is 9. So if you're familiar with JavaScript or Python, it allows you to do the same thing with dynamically creating variables and strings and things like that. Name is a variable, so it's going to be there forever now. If you want to get rid of it, you just go holder.name equals nil, and it's gone. So that's how you create dynamically variables and get rid of them. All right, so that covers that. So if you're familiar with languages that have ways of comparing things, if you want to test greater than, equal than, I'll show you some of these, and I'll print it in Skype so you can see. So we have the pretty standard fare here. We have less than, greater than or equal to, greater than or equal, less than or equal to, equals, equals, and not. So if 1 is greater than 2, then print Twilight Zone, because that's impossible. We also have if, like if you're doing a game and you're trying to see if you reach a destination, if destination is greater than or equal to the goal, which could be, I don't know, 300, then, print you win, right? Not is a little what I wasn't used to. So like if you're trying to say if, let's see, name equals equals first name, then print match. If name does not equal, or how about this? If password does not equal the password, then fail at life. So these are the pretty standard ways of comparing things like this. I'm used to not, if you're from Actionscript, it's actually this. I think it's in that and other languages too, but they use tilde, which tilde is really hard to type. So I don't know why they did that. So that's if-then statements, that's comparison operators. This is really all the basics you'll need to build most of your apps. So what else? I think that covers the basics. The logical operators, we have and or not as well, which are good. Blah, blah, blah. These are pretty straightforward. I think the only thing, again, to reiterate, is that local is really important from a speed perspective, and there's a blog entry I'm going to link you guys to. I encourage you to read it. It's written by one of the Corona developers. It talks about how local is really fast and how you can actually make local references to things that are in your actual script to actually speed it up. So it makes it completely unreadable, but it's worth it because every little bit of speed counts. So let's talk about return values. This is something that I didn't know about in Lua that I thought was pretty unique. You can return multiple values from functions. So I'll pause a minute and let that sink in. So if you're used to most languages, you return a value. You don't return multiple values. So for example, I'm going to say get sum, okay? And I'm going to say return let's say 1 plus 1. We'll call print get sum, and it'll print 2, okay? But let's say I want to get a point, which is an x and y value. So I'm going to say return 100 and 200. Now I want to show you, look at the output. You get 2 values. It's the most bizarre shit I've ever seen in any programming language anywhere. So if you want to get those values and actually play with them, you can go get x, y equals get point. Actually, let's use a better variable. Say the x, the y equals get point. Print the x, the y. Right, it's the same thing. And to print it better, we'll say the x, print the y. There you go. Now the reason this is important is that the new audio APIs for 3D utilize this a lot to get both the audio handle to what you're doing as well as a return value. So it seems subtle, but it's very important for that. It's also good for errors because sometimes the errors will turn true or false, and then what the error particularly was, information about it. So very, very strange way of doing things, but it's pretty cool. So I'll paste that in Skype for those of you who can't see. So that's returning 2 variables, Mark. It's not a table, which totally blew my mind. And Darren's reminding me that a lot of string methods return. He's right, I forgot. Okay, I didn't forget, I didn't know. But yeah, he's right. There's a lot of functions that return that. You're the best support ever, Darren. I'm going to do all presentations with you now. So it's very valuable, too, for if you're returning... if you don't want to have to create a table to return something, and sometimes you don't care about the other values. So that's why it's a pretty neat functionality. So anyway, any function you can do in it, it's optional. You can actually ignore the second parameter as well if you don't want to. So you notice the second's nil because I just ignored it. So very, very strange, but very cool, I guess. I don't know. I'm still, like I said, I'm still learning if that's good or not. All right, what else? You've already seen error, which is cool. Loops. Okay, so I'm not going to get too deep into loops. All I'm going to say is stick with while loops that use local variables, and you'll do just fine. Loops inside of Corona, and I'm going to paste this in Skype, are 1-based. So most C, JavaScript, I believe PHP, and other languages are 0-based. That means that arrays are 0-based. Lua is not like that. It's 1-based. It's very similar to director lingo if you're familiar with that. So that means that all arrays start with 1. Now, tables and arrays are synonymous in Lua. So table, array, they're the same thing, right? The difference is we don't have any methods to really help. Like we've got table.insert, which is very similar to array.push if you're familiar with that. And we've got table.remove. And we got table dot, I think, get max in or something, which is like the same thing as length equals table pound table, right? So it's let's see, this is about the same as like array dot length if you're familiar. So the problem I have with that is that for for loops it gets really tricky. What that means is if you have 15 items in a table, let's say table equals, and I'll print this in Skype in a minute. If you have item 1 equals uno, item 2 equals dos, and item 3 equals trace, and you loop through it, and let's say item 3 equals nil, okay, and let's say uno, dos, tres, cuatro, right. The loop will abort on item 3, so you'll never get to item 4. So it uses nil as a very important demarcation line of knowing when to stop in for loops. So if you were to loop over this, and I'll show you right now what happens. This drove me nuts. But all right, so let's say table. All right, let's say array, so it's a little more familiar with those familiar with arrays. Array equals table. And you'll find you're doing a lot of loops if you're trying to loop over groups of items and your groups in like when you create images or when you create sprites, like let's say bullets. let's say you're doing object pulling in your game and you want to recognize where those objects are, you'll tend to do that a lot. This is the basics. So what happens is when I get to an item that's nil, the array will stop. So it's kind of known that in this case, this array, notice how it doesn't have an item 3. I'm going to paste this in Skype. One thing you'll notice is that it'll stop at item 2. So this is kind of a way to know if you've reached the end of the array. In other languages, you actually have to denote the length, like vectors and things like that, where in Corona, it's just if it's nil, it's the end, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. And again, if you do this, a while loop, it's traditionally faster than using the iPairs. iPairs you can use, but it's not really recommended. And so I have an iPairs here somewhere. Let's see. Well, anyway, I'll find it later. So yeah, here's another example of what Darren was talking about with multiple return values from string functions. I pasted it in Skype for those to see. It's basically the concept if you're trying to find indexes of where strings start and stop. So it's pretty strange. Let's see. Also, it has rest-based. So if you're familiar with passing in an arbitrary number of variables to a function, so let's say you want to create a function that adds a bunch of numbers together and returns the sum, you can do that as well. And it uses dots, so it's similar to Actionscript and I think PHP. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I coded PHP. I'm going to paste that in Skype for you guys. So that's really all you need to know about Lua. Let's briefly touch on OOP. So we talked about how you instantiate classes and why would you want to create classes. Well, the whole concept of OOP and Lua is that you want to reuse things. You want to reuse objects. So if you look at the way Corona does it, let's go to some of their display objects. And I'll give you an overview of Corona in a minute on their architecture, but I just want to show you how they do display objects, how Darren does display objects, and how I do display objects. So let's go to the factory functions and look at the most standard thing you can find on the web of creating an image. And I'm going to paste this in Skype. They use factory functions because I believe their tables, such as display and others, are actually wrappers around C objects. So rather than allow you to instantiate tables and messing with it, they just give you a brand new unique table, in this case the image. So here's how you instantiate an image. If you've done any Corona, this should look very familiar. So that my image is actually a table, and you can add things to it and everything else, but it's automatically added to the stage, and that's how you see things. But that image doesn't have any functionality. So if you want to give that image the ability to move, if you want to give that ability to go places, that's really like where a lot of us traditional programmers have problems. So if you want to look at this guy named Darren, who's on the call right now, if you go to ludicroussoftware.com, his blog has a really interesting entry, which I've kind of copied. Click his blog on how you do classes and how you create reusable Lua scripts that you can use project to project, whether that's for creating sprites, whether that's creating utility classes, or in our case, creating game sprites that have behaviors, right? So while his blog's loading, because my connection's slow, I'll show you an example. So in my code, I have this thing called a bullet, and a player bullet. I'm going to paste this in Skype. It's going to be a little big. Bear with me here. Player bullet single. Player bullet single. So player bullet single is basically a bullet that the player shoots out of their gun, okay? And what that is it's a little bullet, the image right here, player bullet 1, right? It's a really small little image. But there's a couple things it needs to know about. It needs to have speed. How fast does it move? It needs to have a name so I can uniquely identify it elsewhere. It needs to have a cleanup function so I can get rid of it. I can make sure that when it's done and hits something that it gets removed. So I have to add a function to that image or that table, right? It has collisions. I need to know when it hits something. It's a physics object, so I need to add to it. So this class, what I like to call a class, is basically similar to what Darren recommends on his blog. You basically create an object or a table. You add a new function to it, because everyone in Corona seems to be obsessed with new. And you instantiate it like so. You basically go local, or let's say bullet equals player bullet single dot new 100 100, and that's it. That's basically how you instantiate things. So whether you're creating a utility class or whether you're creating an actual image, as long as you return it at the very bottom, right, where it says return on line 69. I know it's hard to see the line in Skype, but if you see that, that bullet will be that image with behavior added to it. So this is basically how we've emulated classes. I won't get into inheritance right now, but basically that's how you at least share and create reusable code. When you want to use this particular script, in this case it's called player bullet single, you just do a require at the very top of whatever class wants to use it and pass in the name without the .lua. So in this case, if I wanted to use player bullet single in any of my code anywhere, I'm going to paste this in Skype for those who can't see, I would do that. And that's really it. So as long as your script is called player bullet single.lua, you're good to go. All right, so that's enough about Lua. Let's go give a good overview of Corona here. Because Corona itself is got some unique concepts that some people might not be familiar with. And if you're a Flash developer, it's completely whack. There's a lot of things that are familiar and also written completely different. So Corona has the concept of display objects. So I'm going to go to the docs, and I encourage you to do so as well. It was that link I sent earlier. If you go to Anscamobile.com / well, actually it's developer. I'll paste it in Skype again just in case. If you look on the left there, there's a bunch of things that it does. These are what I like to call objects. So Corona has ads, it has analytics, it has animations, it has audio. Every single one of these high-level, top-level objects allows you to do things, right, inside of a game. And the way you do it is you use these things called display objects. So Corona wraps its whole everything you see on the screen around display objects. What that really means is if you can see it on the screen, it's a display object. If you can't see it on the screen, it's something else, right? You can't see a math equation on the screen, but you can see an image, right? That's a way to wrap your mind around it. And they basically have a few objects that you should basically memorize. The first is an image. Image is like the #1 thing you'll use because you'll load in game sprites that way. You'll load images for Sprite Sheets and things like that. So image is what you see on the screen, and it has a few strange properties. I'm not used to projects doing this, but if you look at the image constructor, what they actually handle is resolution for you, because mobile devices change in terms of how much resolution it has. So images, they do a lot of scaling for you on some of your images for you. In Flash and Flex and other, in Objective-C and other places, whether you're building for iPhone or Android, you have to build either multiple images or vector graphics that scale. So Corona does a little bit for you in terms of the display new image, whether it's full resolution or not. And full resolution is also a catch-all to make sure that you don't use too much texture memory. So images are important. They have vector graphics, if you're familiar with drawing like graphs and lines and shapes and squares. You can call a new circle or you can call a new rect. These basically draw the normal standard vector graphics that you're used to in other languages. So I use rect a lot because I don't really understand yet how registration points are handled in Corona. So this allows you to draw red lines to the screen, and I'll show you right here what it looks like. And it's nice because you can see exactly where things are drawn. So if I take this, I paste it, and I run, you're going to see a box drawn as soon as the emulator runs. Actually, let me abort my terminal. I think it exploded. Let's try that again. So you'll see I have a gray box in the top left up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color to red. This is RGB, and the way I remember it is RGB, or I think there was a mnemonic device for it. Red, green, blue. What they don't tell you in the docs on the example code is the third parameter is alpha. So if you want to make an alpha, you just say anywhere from 1 to 0, or a float. So that was one thing that was kind of frustrating. So 0, 0, 0. So there you go, you got a red square. And if you guys can't see it on the screen, I'll copy the code in Skype so you can try it on yours. So that's basically what I use to debug where the heck my things are drawing, because I don't know. And you'll notice that if you instantiate rectangle, it's automatically displayed. Unlike Flash and other languages, you don't have to add it anywhere. It's just as soon as it's created, it's displayed. So there's this concept of things called groups in Corona, and they allow you to add things to groups and keep it organized. So let's say I had like 5 rectangles, and I wanted to group them together. Get rect. I'm going to take this rectangle, and put it here, and I'm going to say, let's say get rect 1, rect 2, and rect 3. I'm going to paste this code in Skype. Just give me a second. By the way, the standard question, can you guys, those of you still in the call, can you see and hear my screen okay? You can just tell me in Skype yes or no. If not, I'll make sure I'm recording extra stuff. So this is going to be 3 rectangles. I'm going to take rect 2 and move it to 100. Rect 3, move it to 300. Get rid of this. Make sure my stuff compiled. Laggy, yeah, I know. It's always laggy. And return it, so I'm not a moron. There we go. So you can see I create 3 rectangles and move it. The problem is, what if you wanted to move all 3 rectangles down, right? You have to, move individually rect 1, 2, and 3. So they have this concept of a group called display.newGroup. And what you can do is you can add things into groups. So insert rect 1. And I'm going to insert all 3 rectangles. Notice how I don't have to remove the rect from anywhere. I just automatically insert it into the group, right? Now I'm going to take this group and I'm going to move it 100 to the right and 100 down. You'll notice the rectangles go with it, right? So groups are a great way to layer your GUI, and there's a class called Director, if you're not familiar in Corona, that uses groups to allow you to quickly create gaming screens, and it's all built on this group concept. So definitely check out Director. It's a pretty popular Corona class. I'll send a link on the blog entry. All right, so that's rectangles. We also have image recs, which allow you to get particular parts of images. And there's also text. Text, again, you heard right, image, vectors, and text. That's really it. There's groups and there's other widgets and things and native things, but these are the 3 main things you really care about, right? Text is very, very limited. If you're used to other languages, it doesn't have multi-line, it doesn't have wrap. It's really hard to work with. So I encourage you, if you're from another language that has some kind of concept of like Flash, for example, the common properties and methods of display objects are something you want to look at because they handle the whole concept of moving things around in a very unique way. So let's take a look at properties real quick. So all display objects appear on the screen by X and Y. That's pretty obvious, but you can actually adjust other things about them, such as alpha. You can make their alpha like kind of transparent. You can get how much width and height they actually take up. So if you rotate it, this will actually do the math for you to say how much room does it really take up. If hit testable, if you want to make something hit testable but yet make it invisible, that's a very good property to have. Otherwise, if you want to like have a cloud floating off, in the air, but you don't want it to be hit testable, that's a good thing to have. Visible turns it basically invisible or not. Do you see it or not, right? Masks allow you to block off a certain part. Parent is what group it's in. So parent is a very important property to know because you have to, when you want to know if something's in a group or not, that's where it is. And then, of course, X and Y. Width and height you can set, but you shouldn't really set width and height after you've created it. You should probably set width and height you should really just read. So those are the common properties. Hit test the bounding box. Okay, so Mark, I'll get to your hit test in a minute. When I talk about physics, it's very, very important. And it's a very good question. So let's see. The methods are a little strange. There's one method I think every Flash developer on the phone should listen to, and that is set reference point. So in most authoring tools, in most design tools, in most programming language, the registration point on the object is in the top left. Corona, it's always centered. Drives me batshit crazy. So whenever I create anything but a group, okay, I call objects at reference point center, and then I say display top left. So the X and Y registration point is 0, 0. So that one's centered, okay? What I want to say is display top left reference point. I always move after the move clips. Yeah, I know. But see, in Flash, it's by default right there, right? In Lua, when you do a new image, it's centered. So if I move it around, it's very confusing. So I always do that for everything but groups. Groups, I think, default to that, I think. So anyway, that's something you want to do. The other thing that is very interesting to look at is add event to listener. All display objects have the ability to dispatch events and listen to events. If you're not familiar with events, events are ways to talk to each other. There's really 3 types of ways to do this in any programming language. You can do callbacks, where you pass a reference to another person's function and call it. You can do events, like Corona, Flash, and a few other languages do it. Or you can do notifications, which are basically references to yourself in arrays and send messages. So Corona is built pretty heavily on the event model. And what an event is you basically say, I want to know when I touch something, or I want to know when I hit something. Runtime is the main dude who sends messages out that you care about. And you can do runtime.addEvent listener, listen when you touch something, listen when you interframe. And they always have the same signature. It's the name of what event you're looking for and the function or table that responds and handles the event. You'll notice in the example code here, which I'll paste in Skype, that they're passing a function. But you can pass a table as the listener if you want, and I do that all the time. The table can either have itself passed, in which case it'll look for a touch function, or you can pass the table's function, in which case it'll pass that. You can also pass a closure if you're familiar with those as well. The great thing about events in Corona is that you can create your own events. So to give an example, in my game, I use tons of custom events. And for example, when an object is destroyed, I dispatch my own custom event called remove from game loop, right? If you've ever done events in Actionscript 1, this should be very familiar. If you've ever done it in Actionscript 3, you're probably like, what the hell is this? So let me paste this. So that's how you do a custom event. And this is very central to building games and communications. People will argue that you're better using callbacks for speed, but events are, in my opinion, one of the best ways of actually doing messaging. And runtime, it's built in, right? So you can add event listener, you can remove. If you don't want to hear about it anymore, you call remove event listener and it'll get rid of it. You'll notice here how he passes an object or a table to the listener, and I'll paste that in Skype. Notice how it looks for the touch function on my class when he passed it in. So very, very important. If you want to create event handlers. If you're used to using on in ActionScript, it's very similar. So that's display objects in a nutshell. You can create images, you can create things like that. There's a lot of other different types of display objects that aren't really listed here, though. One of them is called the stage. The stage is very similar to your screen or what you see, and it gives you some info on basically what's focused, but more importantly, how big things are. So let me show you the stage, some of his properties, which are pretty important to know. So let's see. Stage gives you info on not just where the screen is. So for example, if you make an iPhone game and then port it to iPhone 4, iPhone 4 is double the resolution, right? Sometimes your scaling might be in centered. So Stage will give you all that information about where things are. It also, just like any other group, it tells you how many objects are in Stage and whether you want to add things or remove things. So these 3 things are pretty important to know too. Group and Stage are the same thing. They're synonymous. All right, so that's the basics of display objects. So let's talk about some of the things that I think are unique to Corona. And we'll hit physics, because that's really why most people love Corona. So if you're not familiar with physics, physics are basically 2 very important things. And I'll send you the link in Skype. Physics are how things interact with each other in terms of gravity, in terms of colliding, in terms of friction, in terms of density and weight, and what's great about Corona is any display object you create can immediately be added to the physics, become a physics object via add body. So what does that really mean? Well, let me show you the sample code, and you'll have a pretty good idea. So if you go into wherever Corona is installed on your computer, they have a bunch of wonderful samples that they include, and one of them is called physics. So Corona sample code physics. And Mini Creates is the one you can find on YouTube. So I'm going to double click the main Lua file, and I'm going to launch it in TextMate. And what they're doing here is they're making a display object image fall, but the key function you want to look at here is called physics.addBody. Physics.addBody says take this display object and start making it, react with other physics objects, right? That means if it hits it, it collides. If it's a wall, that it can't go through it, things like that, right? And there's different types of physics objects. Like you'll notice the grass is static. That's why the blocks hit it and never go through it, no matter how heavy they are, right? So I'll show you that. The properties that you really care about are basically density, friction, and bounce. So density is how thick something is. Friction is if it hits it, does it slide off like water, or does it grab hold like rock or Velcro or something like that. Bounce is if you're in a bouncy ball or you have rubber shoes or something, and those three together, it handles all of that. Okay, so if you look at the physics demo for that, add body is all you need to know about. Now there's one catch that you need to be worried about when you're dealing with physics, and that is that physics, you can remove bodies as well. The problem with remove body is that if you're in the middle of a collision, and let's say my bullet collides with an enemy, I then immediately remove that bullet from the physics engine and the plane. There's a problem with that. You can't do that. Box2D, the physics engine that Corona uses, doesn't like when you remove physics bodies from the collision engine while it's doing detection. So you should run a timer to remove it later. It's very similar to an interval. It's a very safe way to do it. Now, as of last week, they fixed it so it doesn't crash the emulator, it doesn't crash your game. Instead, physics.removeBody, I'll write it right here, will return a false if it didn't work. So it won't crash now. But that was a very common cause of crashes for physics. And the way, all you have to do to set up physics is this. And there's one thing that they don't show you, I want to show you right now, actually, it's pretty important, is this nifty little debug thing. Where's physics? Physics. There we go. It's called Draw Mode Hybrid. So let's show you what draw modes do. These are very important for debugging your game. And this goes back to what you were saying, Mark, when I get to collisions, and I'll show you that in a second. You'll notice these boxes, if I say hybrid, there's another one too. Let me show, get the other one. Where's the other one? Physics. There's three ways you can do it. You can see the normal world when you say physics.start. You can say hybrid. It'll actually show you the rect around the objects or what their box is or polygons are. And there's another one that just shows hybrid. So it shows, here it is, debug. Hybrid shows you both the polygons around it and the image. So if you take that demo and set the physics mode, draw mode to debug, notice how everything is just a polygon box. You can see actually what Box2D or Corona is thinking is the rect or collision area, or like you were saying before, hit state for that particular thing. So debug is the quickest way to determine why your objects are colliding weird or not. It makes a big deal when you're doing polygons and circles. For boxes, not so much. And I'll paste that in Skype so you can see it. And you don't need to do local like they're doing, but people do it just out of common. Now, if I do hybrid, you can see them both. So hybrid allows you to see both where the things are colliding and where the boxes are. You'll notice that the grass, its wall, is actually a little, below it, but doesn't include the whole thing, right? So this allows you to really debug if your collisions are going wrong. So let's talk about collisions for a minute. Collisions are by default. That means that everything added to the physics world, when you do add body, will collide with everything else. Now, you can override that property with something called a collision filter. Now, I'm not going to talk big about it, but I'll give you a blog entry that links to some good stuff about how you handle multi-collision stuff in a minute. What it's called is collision filters, and there's a physics method that allows you to say, I want these bullets to collide with the enemies, but not the player. I want enemy bullets to collide with the player, but not enemies, right? There's ways of making it happen, and you don't have to code that yourself. You just have to use numbers. So if you go to physics.addBody in the docs, towards the bottom it'll explain that. And this is really the crux of how you quickly make games with collisions without having to write a lot of code. If you want to do polygons, you basically pass in a custom shape. But by default, things are either rectangles or circles unless you say otherwise. So that's physics in a nutshell. There's a lot more to physics, like how you move things, how the gravity affects them, and I'll send you a YouTube video that shows the effects of gravity. If you want to build a plane game like I did, you just set gravity to 0, so you can use the physics engine and the collisions without having to worry about your planes falling down, right? So that's basically that. I'm going to briefly go over some other things here. JSON is a really, really, really important addition to Corona. And the reason why is that Corona didn't really have a way easily to do level editing in Corona. There was no real easy way to get an external format into Corona unless you read a local file or got it to a device, and you had to use your own custom format. Well, there's so many libraries around JSON that it's really easy to do. So, for example, let me show you this FlexBuilder app here I have. It's a level editor that I made for the plane game. And what it does is it actually exports JSON. I can then take that JSON and import it into Corona, and it brings it in as a table. So I'm going to open this JSON level file, which is in for GitHub code level 2. And so this is my level editor where I create enemies and movies and things like that, right? This will save out JSON. Inside of Corona, I can read that JSON in, and let me see where the JSON is. There it is. And with one line of code, you can read in your JSON, and your level is now a table object. So here's an example of, I'll put it in Skype for those who can't see. So that allows you to bring JSON data for levels, whether you're doing user preferences. Let's say you want to save user preferences out to the local device. You can save it out as JSON and read it back in. So it seems minor, but it was a pretty important feature in the latest build of, I think 2 weeks ago, or maybe a month ago for Corona. So there's only really 3 functions. And that is code, encode, and null. Decode is where you basically take this string. There's a blog post on how to really use it, but that's the important thing to look at. So real quick, did that answer your questions about collisions, Mark? I know I didn't really go too much into it. I can show you some code. I think that would actually help. All right. Yeah, there's, like I said, by default, all objects collide with all objects, right? So you don't have to add code for that. You just listen for collision events and call it a day, right? It actually works with 3. It works with circles, rectangles, and polygons. And if you want, let me see if I can get a boss here. Let me open that level 2 for GitHub. And I'll open the code level 2. I'll change this JSON to a bomber. Okay. I'll then go to the top and set, where's physics? I'll set my physics engines, physics, to hybrid, and you'll be able to see a polygon around the boss. Okay. So I'm going to start my game here. If I didn't break the code, it still should theoretically run. And the source code's on GitHub for this. If you want to compile it on your own, you can do that as well. But it has some physics code in it that deals with polygons specifically. So give me a second for Corona to launch. Oops, I already broke my game. There we go. All right, let me turn this down a little bit. All right, see the square around the player in the middle? All right, now watch the big guy come. Now you can see that that's a polygon. Now I don't know if you saw it, but on the side there, it actually went around the wing. And if you can't see it, I'll give you a link to the GitHub code here in a second. You're welcome to compile this yourself. All you have to do is open main AS in TextMate or in the simulator, and it should just work. It's on GitHub. Oh, you just need it. All right, here. Well, here, I'll give you the code. You can compile it yourself. Just turn physics hybrid mode on. You'll see it commented out. And you can see how the polygon collides with the bullets and how it's... Yeah, it's all right. One thing to note, too, is that the collision filters seem very, very overwhelming. Use a spreadsheet. This guy posted a spreadsheet in his blog entry, and it's awesome. Let me say, you know what? I got to find that now that I'm talking about it. It's really great for quickly determining what hits what. So if I want my axe to hit a bad guy but not a player, let's say if I'm making a multi-user game, then I can make sure that happens, right? For physics shapes, you want to make complex. Oh, they actually have a fireworks plugin? Man, I could have used that. I had to manually type in those polygons with Rex, man. That was the worst. All right, that's great. All right, here we go. All right, so if you go to this blog entry and scroll to the bottom, at the very bottom, you'll see this guy. He wrote this. Yeah, here it is. This is a wonderful, wonderful collision mechanism. Copy link. Yeah, there we go. So that'll give you all you need to know about collisions. It's a wonderful way of doing the charts really quickly to know the numbers, because it uses bitwise flags or something. And like I said, I'm not very good at math, so I just use the spreadsheet and it worked great. And if I can figure it out, that means you guys can figure it out. I think the one thing to know about physics, if you look in the thing I want to show you, kinematic means that it's well, here, look. So is bullet. Bullets. There's two types of physics objects: bullets and not bullets. Okay, so bullets are objects that are constantly checked for collisions. Non-bullets are not. So when you're calling physics.addBody, you call isBullet true, and it looks something like this. If you say false, it allows the physics engine to sleep and not always check for collisions on a particular object. So for bullets, obviously you want to check always for collisions. But a tree or a box, let's say you're creating a platform game, you don't want to check collisions always. You know, it allows it to sleep, so it's good for performance. So sensors are another type of object. Sensors mean that it's a physics object, but it doesn't actually exist. What that means is that it still checks for collisions, but it's not like a box. It's like a hole inside of a pool table, right? If you're familiar with pool tables, or a pit inside of a pit game. So you can detect to see if your character fell over it, but it doesn't actually have a shape or anything. It's kind of invisible, right? So that's really it, man. I mean, every single object you create, whether it's a movie clip, whether it's a sprite sheet, or whether it's a display object, can be called a physics object, which is great. So let me show you Sprite Sheets real quick. Sprite Sheets kind of threw me for a loop because Flash developers have something called movie clips, but apparently Corona people don't. Now, Corona has a movie clip class, but it's not the same. It's completely different. The docs for Sprite Sheet. They want you to pass in a big image, and sections of the image are a frame. It's really bizarre. But it's basically a really easy way for them to do animations. It's a way for them to control the speed, and it works independent of time. So you can guarantee, for the most part, that it'll look the same whether it's on 30 frames per second on a crappy Android device or 60 frames per second on a awesome iPhone device. I know you hate iOS, but still. So let me put that in Skype. So Sprite Sheets are really just animations that require a lot of code. That's what they really are. But I'll show you what one of my Sprite Sheets looks like here. Close Flash Motor to get some RAM back here. Okay. Let me open the player. And the whole concept of Sprite Sheets is that you have a sprite over a period of time. So I'm going to wait for my screen to update to see if you guys can see this. But I basically have an explosion. So it's when a plane gets shot down. And it consists of 5 frames of animation. So I go in a tool like Fireworks or Photoshop, and I make sure every single size is the same, such as 32 by 32 or whatever, and you put it in a long strip. It can be vertical, it can be horizontal, but this is how you basically do your animations. So it's not like Flash where you use frames or other languages where you actually script it. Like in Corona, you actually give it a big old image with the frames and tell it which frames to use, right? So that's how sprites work. Sprite Sheets are used a lot for doing animations. You can also do transitions. Transitions are a way where you animate things to and from. So if you notice when I started my game, it faded in and fades out and the button bounces. Transitions allow you to do the standard things. Like if you're a Flash developer and familiar with tween light, that's what transitions are. And I'll show that under animation. And if you look in that GitHub link, it has some example code for Sprite Sheets, which are a pain in the ass. One thing to note about transitions is if you're a Flash developer is they're very limited. So Josh Tingela actually ported Grant Skinner's G-tween to Lua. So I'll show you the forum link here in a second. Let's go to Community, Forums. And the reason it's important is he's got bounce and he's got a lot of other wonderful easing. Yeah, that's what I was talking about, Mark. It's not. I don't know why Josh liked G-tween better than Greensock. I got really pissed off. But I'm not gonna say, I'm not gonna say, Josh, why didn't you tweet, convert the other one? Because it was really nice to give it away for free. You know what I mean? So I'm like, maybe someday we can convince that guy that works at Tweenlight to convert it. That'd be great. Because I like the API better too. Yeah, this concept of ads and analytics. So Corona actually is different in Flash in that it does a series of blocking calls. So what that means is that they can utilize other services on the device and block. That means it freezes the code. Okay. Actionscript and other things are different. They'll some things will actually wait for an event. I believe Java sometimes blocks, but in this case, for opening ads or opening virtual currency, it'll block. So if you look at the ads, it'll actually show those ads in a particular location, right? All you have to do is sign up with Corona and implement that in, and within 48 hours it'll show up, right? Very, very simple. If you've used the AdMob or Google's AdSense, it's a big pain in the ass in Flash. So this is one of the things that really drew me doing ad-based development for this. But the really cool thing is if you go to Game Network, there's basically 3 services that you want to know about for creating games. The first is really these 3 lines of code: init, request, and show. But the first is OpenFaint. OpenFaint has high scores and leaderboards, so you don't have to code any of that yourself. So if you're building a game, it's all built in. But one thing that's important is the in-app purchases and currency. There's this service called Super Rewards, and what it does is it gives you credits, and it's per app. And this is the iPhone stuff right here. And it works cross-platform. So the link I just sent you, the app purchases, only works in iOS. And you have to go through iTunes to set up your products. So if you want to do virtual goods. Now your first question is, why the hell would I want to do virtual goods? Well, if you look at the numbers online, there's a significant amount of of research that shows that virtual goods outperform ads and outperform paid apps. So virtual goods are definitely something that you want to investigate. Believe it or not, consumables, that means that things that are eaten or worn and go away, are actually more valuable, and I've seen this corroborated, than other things. So let me show you the link. I got to find it here in my Google Plus. Give me a second. But when you have time, I encourage you to read it. It's only about a page long, and it shows some numbers on how they made some money. Very, very important. Now, keep in mind this is one study, but I've seen this corroborated everywhere. So it's really, really something to look out for. If there's a way that you can build your game from day one with that kind of capability, if you're really looking to monetize, that's something you want to look at. All right, so let's look at, you got open feints, you got that. I'm not really going to go over super rewards, but bottom line is 3 lines of code allows people to buy credits for your game, and then you can use them in your game, and you get them as a table. So request and show are actually what I was talking about, the blocking calls. Like it'll actually go open a web browser, and then show gets the latest data. So let's see. Yeah, here you go. So if you go to this link, the game networks, there's really 2, Papaya and OpenFeint. Papaya talked this morning if you saw the Ustream. But some of these guys for super rewards allows you to, let me open the sample, allows you to actually get credits and see how many credits the user has and things like that. So let's go to credits. There it is. Yeah, so if you look in the samples that come with Corona, there's something called super rewards. And all you do is set up your API, and you can get credits and see how many credits the person has and allow the person to buy it. So it's basically this and this. And I'm going to paste this in Skype so you can take a look. So that first function will actually call a callback and give you how many credits you have. So it may seem trivial, but believe it or not, that's where the money is in Corona right now, is finding ways to use credits to make money with your games. All right, so let's see what else. Those are really the only things I think you guys should really care about right now. The rest of the stuff is fun, but that's the main high level. Let's see, we got ads, we got virtual currency. All right, so 3 things I wanted to talk about really on with regards to platforms. So Corona versus Flash. Corona and Flash are, believe it or not, have a lot of the same market in mind. I mean, Corona is allowing you to create games and apps in the same market, right? You can develop for Android and iOS and sell your products. And it's known that Flash Builder has superior tooling to what Corona has. It's just miserable tracking down null pointers all day in Corona and debugging on devices and everything else. But the reason Corona gets so much traction is because, number one, it has physics. Number 2 is all those things I showed you on the left, such as ads, virtual currency, are built in and they work. And you can go to Corona's website and monitor them. With Flash, you have to build all that stuff yourself. A big pain. So it's a big challenge right now for doing consumer-based Flash stuff on that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to applications, I think Flash is going to continue to dominate there, and I think Corona's got a long haul if they're going to get something close to what Titanium has. It's another way to build cross-platform apps with native code, and PhoneGap and others. But I keep coming back to Corona because of the physics, the ad integration, the credits integration. It's all there. It works. It's easy to use. You get analytics, and it's just packaged up really nicely. If you're going to do an RPG, Flash has all the bitmap blitting things you need, but if you're frustrated and really want is Corona, they do use the GPU by default for everything you use. So all your display objects, all your images are all using the GPU. And I think by accident, their masks use the GPU as well. So if you create a gigantic tile map and mask it, you might get decent performance. So I didn't know that, but I found that out by accident. So there's an old thread I'll post on the blog later, and you can see that. So that's why most people are like, well, if you're a Flash developer, why in the heck are you using Corona so much? Well, I don't want to code ads. They work. I don't want to code credits. They already work. And I don't want to code physics because Box2D and Ape 3D, the physics engines ported to Flash, run horrible on devices. I mean, absolutely atrocious. Android and iOS, there's more money in iOS. So, unfortunately, like the purchases for iOS are actually better than the credits because it's built right in. It uses the person's credit card on their phone, and you don't have to worry about Apple freaking out if Super Rewards starts doing something whack, right? Android has better global penetration. And there are also some features that it does differently too. So Android is still relevant from a lot of the virtual currency stuff. And it's proven that if you're building customization stuff, that there are a lot of people who pay for that. So even though people keep talking about all the monies in iOS, you're starting to see an uptick for Android. And Corona works on all these crappy phones, which is great. Flash, not so much. And the problem with Android too is their GPUs are pathetic too. So a lot of people building games, the last thing they think about is launching or marketing. And Corona's done a really good job of trying to make partnerships with Papaya, as you saw this morning, and Moby and others, to help you market your game and help get it out there. But you're not going to make money from selling games, okay? You're not going to make money from paid unless you're really, really lucky. Now, if you want to be lucky, that's cool. Positive people get more luck. It's scientifically proven, so that's fine. But statistically, paid just doesn't work. Ads, additionally, they were talking about like 5 million impressions. You have to get an insane amount of impressions of ads to make a decent amount of money. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting $150 a month, that you as passive income, okay? That's fine. But virtual goods are proven to get more money in a shorter period of time. And keep in mind, most people only use and play games for 21 days. So that means even if it's on their phone, they won't ever touch it again, unless it's Angry Birds, or unless they're younger than 5. So be aware that when you're trying to figure out how am I going to monetize my game, you really should give virtual goods and currency in the beginning or credits a really good thought before you think about doing ads or paid. So it's just something to be aware of. There are some virtual currency things for Flash, but Corona's got all 3 built in, and you can actually do all 3 if you wanted. You can sell an app with ads that has virtual currency. So something to be aware of. So the last thing I want to talk about is in building my game over the past 6 months, I've had a lot of learning curve things in Corona that I wish I had known going in. So the first thing is this whole concept of nulls or nil. When something breaks, all I have is this terminal, and it sucks. I can't debug it. I sometimes don't know what the nil means. And people who create local functions, like let me see if I can find you one. So they create closures or callbacks. It won't actually print out the name of the function in here. It'll say like question mark, right? So you're better off using functions versus like local closure functions. And then if you do, you give them a name because you can actually give functions a name. So that's been a big pain in the ass for me, is getting stuff like that. Darren actually wrote a blog entry, I believe, last week on how you use the debugger. So that's one thing you can look at for dealing with debugging. But what I found is I do stuff like this everywhere. So I do assert everywhere to make sure that things aren't nil, okay? It's very similar to putting try catches or if nil in ActionScript. You basically ensure the most important thing ever is not nil. And if it is, write a message that makes sense. So when you see it in the terminal, you don't get a bunch of crap that doesn't make any sense, right? So that's one thing you can do. The second thing is you'll notice my files have the standard table with new. If you follow that everywhere else, you start to find that you have the same exact problem for every single class, which is good. That means you solve it faster. The scope thing, notice how hit doesn't have a function. It actually has a self passed in. This crap will drive you bonkers. So if you're not used to scope inside of... I'm glad you find that funny. So this stuff drives you bonkers. So if you want to save yourself a lot of heartache, notice how you self here. You can just hard code it to image and call it a day, right? You can say, I am an image. I'm in image inside of here. It'll just work. Now, it's not as fast, but it's better to be a happy developer than a pissed off one with code that's supposedly fast. Does it make sense? So just something to be aware of that it's like that. Very frustrating. And the last thing is the config. A little important fact is that they don't. There's two configs, but I want to talk about the main config. You don't have to add a config to your Corona project, but it's important that you do, because the width and height says what device was I targeting, and it'll automatically scale. Now, if you're a Flex developer, this should be very familiar with the DPI scaling that Flex does for multi-devices. Width and height says I'm at 320 by 480, and if you're on a device that's 600 by 800, it'll automatically scale it for you. If it doesn't fit, it'll do letterbox, means it puts like the black borders. You can also say where it's aligned. You can say how it scales. And by default, anti-aliasing is off. If you're a Flash or Flex developer, this should be familiar to you with the stage quality.low or stage quality.medium. Well, really stage quality.low, which now works on Adobe Air. It turns off all anti-aliasing on vectors. So if you're drawing boxes or lines, they're going to look horrible, but that's okay. This makes it really fast, so you should probably always keep it off. Now, frame per second is different in Corona than other tooling. Frame per second, you really only have two choices. It's either 30 or 60. So you don't have much of a choice. The reason this is important is that their frame rate has to be divisible by 30. 30, 60, and 90 are, okay? 60 is what iOS defaults to for their engine for Corona, but you can do 30 if you'd like. The reason this is important is that when you're doing game loop stuff, you want to make sure that your game loop, and I'll probably post a blog post about this, but game loops allow your code to run no matter what the frame rate is at. So you'll notice here, if I were to take out this milliseconds passed in my game loop, this bullet would actually move slower in 30 frames per second and faster in 60. That's horrible. All you want it to do is move the same speed, just look better, right? So config Lua is optional, but I put it in there anyway so I can play around with different resolutions. Because on iPhone, it's not a big deal, but Android, it's a nightmare because there's so many different devices with different types of things. So let's see. I think that covers most of it. Again, the 3 points to remember are you want to go to developer.anscamobile reference and bookmark it. This is what I use for everything I do. You can download Corona, and it has samples built in. You can use TextMate to author with it, and I'll send the link to Darren's bundle if you're on a Mac. I'll also send you a link to John Lindquist. He has another way of doing inheritance. So if you're a traditional programmer, you can actually use metatables. I hate them. I use closures, but to each their own, whatever. And you really ought to take a look at some of the marketing that they have on their blog around Dashboard. They're doing a lot of interesting things with partnerships that Adobe failed to do. So they're partnering with people to market your app, people to sell your app, giving you analytics. Adobe tried that and failed. So it's very interesting to see Corona, and if they, within another year, are they going to succeed or not. So it's interesting to see how they're marketing your games and apps and stuff. The forum has a lot of interesting questions and responses from people who are actually veterans in the game industry. I've learned a lot and learned how much I don't know about anything by reading these forums. So I thought I was a badass because I'm a coder. I've done Flash for years. I come in and do Corona. I don't know anything. So this community forum has been really, really helpful for that. And again, I've got an example game that I'm building on GitHub. You're welcome to fork it, hack it, steal everything if you want. If you sell it before I do, you suck, but whatever. To each their own. If you're thinking to do an app, I would look at Flash or Flex. If you're thinking to do a game, Corona is totally where it's at. So yeah, with that, gentlemen, again, my name is Jesse Worden. I'll send you my Twitter is JesterXL. My email is jesterxl@jesseworden.com if you got any questions. So again, if you didn't hear anything I said today, or everything I said was overwhelming, or you're like, oh my God, this is hard, all you need to do is go download the Corona SDK from the website, open the samples folder for physics, and just play. I'm telling you, it's so much fun, and you'll figure it out. It's just a blast. So you can ignore everything I said and just play with the physics all day. So bullet spread Lua. When the player gets an upgrade, he gets guns that shoot 3 different ways. You'll notice at the bottom I returned 3 bullets instead of 1. So That way I can add 3 different bullets. So even though it's a class, it creates 3 different things. It's you know what I mean? It's a little strange. That is one place where I actually did use that particular thing. If you're a Flash developer, you'll notice Lua has a lot more math helper functions than we do, which I thought was really, really nice. And I suck at math, so having things like you know, the whole degree to rotation, like this is wrong. I actually didn't know. They have an angle and degrees function. They have a lot of other math stuff. So it's where is it? Up in math up here that I was blown away by. Yeah. Oh, you know what I want to tell you guys? Oh yeah. Okay. This is what drove me nuts. All right. So you know how when people minimize your app, like you go to iPhone and then you minimize it to go to the home screen, your app still runs. Now in Adobe Air, there's a way to capture that. I didn't know how the frack to do that in Lua, but the way you do it is you listen for an event that's somewhere. Hold on, guys. Gotta find that event. Activate. Activate. No? Crap. Where is that? Activate. See, if I had packages, we wouldn't be having this problem. There it is. All right. So you listen for this on system update event. I'll show you where that is. On system update. Yeah, so Runtime dispatches all your events. You can also dispatch events from Runtime, by the way. Darren didn't like my Robotlegs implementation and said, dude, you really need to use Runtime because you suck. I tried it and I couldn't get it to work, but it can be done. I'm not really smart enough yet to do closures. But this system event listens for system level things. So if you go to, here, I'll show you. So when your app exits or when it's suspended, you just say os.exit and it closes your app. So if you're actually testing your app on the device and you don't have a pause button, this is a godsend. It's a complete godsend. Another thing, too, that is completely different, if you're a Flash or Flex dev, that's completely different from events, is in Flash, you would go, let's say for touch, let me show you a touch event. Touch. So you listen for the phases, just like we do inside of Flash, right? If you began, move the player. If you let go, stop moving the player, right? But you have this return thing. So if you return true, the event will stop bubbling. If you don't return true, it'll continue bubbling, which is a problem when you have 2 buttons on top of each other, because then you start getting weird bugs. So it's a good idea to return true if you've done something with it, right? It's also good to return true from functions if they do a lot of crap. That way you can handle like you know, like asserts, right? So you can see if an assert bugged out. And also, here's a closure I want to show you guys too. So a closure inside of Corona looks like this. And I'll paste the other code for the disabled too. Give me a second. You'll notice that I wait 200 milliseconds before creating the boss because he gets added to the physics engine, and I kept having a bug where it would crash. So that's a closure where you create a temporary function to run in a timer and then it goes away, right? They're used everywhere in freaking, what do you call it? Corona. And there's the response for handling if the application exits. Let's see what else. The other one was, this kind of threw me for a loop too. I forgot. You know how like phones have a display at the top? Like you can turn that off. And most people do for games. It's called display.hide or some crap. But you should always put this at the top of every app you build unless you really want to show people how much battery they have left and stuff. I think it distracts from the experience, so I always like to hide it. No, there it is. Set status bar, yeah. So I'm still learning the packages. Like I said, if you bookmark that website, you'll eventually start memorizing this stuff. All right, well, gentlemen, well, thank you very much for your time. I hope you got something out of it. And for those of you who haven't done this before, I really encourage you to go with the physics, man. That's where the fun stuff is. And if you're doing gaming, really look at some of the business articles out there for mobile and virtual goods. It really shows that that's at least where the market is in money. And I think a lot of Flash developers and gaming developers in general who are building Corona, you'll see it on the forums for them. You'll see it on the Flash development forums for Newgrounds. they really seem to get frustrated when they work 6 months, build a game, and they don't make $1 million. They get really frustrated that they don't even make $1,000 or even $100. They make like $24. And you need to remember that it's all about the journey. I mean, if you enjoy games, then you really will enjoy it. And that's, you need to not focus on the money. You need to focus on, building a game that you really believe in. Because what happens is two things. Number one, the more games you make, the faster it gets each time. You get reusable code, you get the process down, you learn how to market it better, you learn how to prototype quicker. So you'll start to find that your 6 months turns to 3 months, turns to 2 months, turns to 1 month. The other thing that starts happening is you start having 24 games that each make a little bit of money per month. There's nothing wrong with being asleep and making $400. So if you don't get it in the short term by getting $1 million on your first game, there's nothing wrong with getting it in the long haul and getting a bunch of money and passive income per month. So I really encourage you to keep at it, stay positive, and keep at it because eventually it'll come around. And don't focus on Android. So thank you for your time, gentlemen. If you got any questions, you got my email. I'll be on Twitter. And with that, have a good day or night for you Europeans. Tricks used with Flash Builder and Twitter and OF. Oh, you mean OpenFaint? Oh, okay. So Facebook and Twitter on Corona are really easy. They handle all the authentication stuff. So if you go to this link, I'll send you in a second. I'll explain it. What's great about it is some games have the ability to post the ability to high scores to your friends and things like that. So Twitter, Facebook all have that whole link stuff. I haven't really figured out how to post my high score on Facebook, you know what I mean? But if you look at the JSON response that they actually do for Facebook, you can actually read certain things from Facebook into your app. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure you can post as well. The reason it's important is, for example, there's a game called Comb Over Charlie. And what it was a fish game. And you can go look at it on YouTube. And Charlie and I were trying to figure out how do we post the high score to Twitter. The reason Twitter is important is that you can utilize people's networking to get your game marketed, right? So let's say you build a game, they build a high score, and they post to Facebook. I got a 5,000 points on Twitter. You're guaranteed that 80 of their friends are going to see that. If they get that game and they retweet it, that's another 40 people. So integrating with Facebook and Twitter and posting, two things happen. One, your game gets marketed, and B, you bring in a social aspect to that game that they can play, see their friends and talk about it. That's how Mafia Wars was started on Facebook. That's how Farmville was started. It was all about interacting with that game. So instead of just some random game on your phone that's not social, it suddenly integrates with Facebook. You can see what your friends are saying about it and things like that. The other option using the Facebook request stuff, if you look at the stuff, is that if people say, can you build a Facebook app that pulls people's friend feeds in and shows our advertising or something, right? Then you can build yourself out as a application developer using Corona and integrating with Facebook, right? So that's a pretty big deal. With a few lines of code, you can integrate that. So that's, I think, why they do that. Doing this with Flash and Flex is the worst because OAuth is just a nightmare. I don't know how else to say it. It's a nightmare. They on mobile, they have this thing called Stage Web View, which you have to code kind of what Corona already did. You have to code the authentication with OAuth. You have to code the pinless auth, so where they log into Facebook and say, I authorize this app. And I can send you a blog post I had about it, as well as a Stack Overflow post that explains how to do it. So you can do Twitter and Facebook integration to Flash, but it's just a nightmare. So when you look at Corona and they just have it work, that's why I get so excited. And I know Omar, yep, there you go. Yeah, Omar was having a lot of problems with it too. That's why he posted in the chat. Because it's painful, man. It's so painful. Twitter, I don't know if Corona does Twitter. I believe you can use their networking post stuff to do it and bring up you can actually bring up, you can bring up a web browser, but I don't know if you can integrate. I've never done it with Twitter, so I would definitely check on the forums because I know it's been asked about. I hear Darren typing, so maybe he knows. Twitter and Facebook on Flash are the exact same thing. As long as you get the OAuth library from IOTashan, if you get that library working, it'll work for both Twitter and Facebook. Lua live for... Okay, there we go. Good job, Al. This is why we collaborate online. So I haven't used OpenFate with logins yet. I'm actually I'm working on that hopefully next month. I'm trying to get, when I get my high scores working, to actually work with that. So when I figure it out, I'll let you know. Oh, cool. So it's just an init. Okay. Holy cow, it's got everything. That's wonderful. Hey, and it's got the OAuth. Okay, cool.